Hey, what's up everybody? It's TheHyphenate here, and today we're going to talk about what I think is the best all-around lens for the Sony full-frame cameras, the Tamron 28-75 zoom lens that has a constant f2.8 aperture. This lens is a monster and can pretty much do it all. It's great for portraits, landscapes, video, photo, and even some macro. It's an amazing alternative to the Sony 24-70 G Master, and it's only about 40% of the price. If you had to get one lens or choose one lens to take with you on a shoot that had various shooting conditions, this is the lens I would recommend. When it comes to autofocusing, this lens is top notch. It works just about as great as a native Sony lens. Both for video and photo, it tracks subjects very well. IAF, Face AF, it does an amazing job keeping up. As you can see me moving around here, I get a little closer, a little further. I can get out of the frame. I get back in the frame, and I already know this lens has me in focus. The color reproduction of this lens is very nice, very true to life, and it also has a nice punchy contrast that's not overdone. When it comes to detail, this lens is very sharp, even in the corners. Though if you stop it down to f3.5 or f.0, the corners do get a little bit sharper, but even at f2.8, it's very detailed, and I actually shoot f2.8 pretty much all the time with this lens. Flaring is pretty decent on this lens, but chromatic aberration is handled very well. There's very little to none in most shots. Overall, the image quality that you get out of this lens is really fantastic. Another thing that I really like is that it's very compact and lightweight compared to its competition. The reason for that is that unlike most other lenses with this zoom range, this actually starts out at 28mm as opposed to 24mm. This helped keep the size and the weight down dramatically on this lens. On top of that, the build on this lens is mostly plastic. Though it doesn't feel cheap or flimsy at all, it's actually a very solid construction. However, the lens hood does feel a little cheap. It's very thin and doesn't feel very sturdy. However, the lens itself, that is built great. The zoom and focusing rings are rubberized, and they actually feel very smooth when rotating. When it comes to using the focus ring manually, this lens is fly-by-wire, so it's not completely perfect when it comes to smooth focusing. However, it does focus a lot better than a lot of other fly-by-wire lenses. So let's talk about what this lens is great for. Personally, I think this is a must-have for event photography. My company shoots a lot of weddings, quinceañeras, sweet 16s, and all types of other full-day events, and this lens is on 85% of the day. Though it's fairly large compared to prime lenses, it's actually very light and feels very well balanced on a full-frame camera like the Sony a7 III. So holding it for hours at a time isn't very exhausting. With the f2.8, there's a decent amount of background separation, so you get a nice blurry background at whatever focal length, whether it's 28 or 75. And you can use this for portraits or for more wide shots. Again, in events, we're shooting all types of different scenarios, so sometimes we have large groups of people, and sometimes we have just two people or one person in the shot, and being able to zoom and have that constant f2.8 while being able to be in different tight scenarios or in a bigger room, this lens is perfect for all of that. So if you're changing environments or shooting different people or objects at different sizes, this lens is the way to go. Now, when it comes to video, this lens is great for shooting interviews, podcasts, or even if you have a stronger motorized gimbal, you could actually pair this on a full-frame camera like an a7 III, and you can actually move around with the gimbal at 28, 35, 50, 75, and it doesn't feel that front heavy. Personally though, for me, when it comes to video, I shoot mostly prime, so I use this lens more for event photography. Now, another great thing that this lens can do is macro photography. It's not technically a macro lens, however, there's a very, very close minimum focusing distance. So you can get pretty close to a subject and zoom in and get very tight on various objects. And if you're doing macro work on video, you can actually use the Sony a7 III and go into crop mode, and that'll give you an equivalent to 112.5mm focal length. Another great thing is that you can actually do firmware updates on this lens by having the lens connected to your Sony camera and the camera connected to the computer via USB. All the updates Tamron has released has really made this lens perform even better. All right, so let's talk about some of the things I don't like about the lens. One is that it actually has a little bit more trouble autofocusing when there's low light and you're underexposed. It does take a little bit longer to find focus than Sony native lenses in the same conditions. It doesn't hunt overly bad, but it does take some extra time. But again, that's if you're underexposed. So if you're in low light conditions, but you crank up the ISO a little bit to expose properly, you actually really won't have any of those autofocusing issues. But honestly, even when it's underexposed, though it does take a slightly bit longer time than the native Sony lenses, I don't find it to actually be that bad. Another thing is that this lens does have some pretty significant barrel distortion. It's pretty noticeable and definitely worse than native Sony lenses. However, it's actually pretty easy to fix in camera. If you go to your in-camera lens compensation settings, you can actually turn on the barrel distortion, vignetting, and chromatic aberration compensations. Now, if you're shooting photos in RAW, it doesn't matter if you have that compensation on or off because you can fix that easily in Lightroom with one click of a button. But for video, it's a little bit harder. So going into the camera settings and turning on that compensation for the barrel distortion for video, it definitely helps dramatically. Now, when it comes to bokeh or bokeh, however you want to pronounce it, that background blur, the round spheres, this actually is pretty nice in regards to the shape. However, there does seem to be some concentric rings. If you zoom in very tight, then you can definitely notice it. But honestly, it's not a big deal breaker. It's not that bad. However, the Sony lenses do make a more buttery smooth bokeh. So even with those things that I mentioned that I don't really like, honestly, they're very minor and I don't think they're that bad. It doesn't take away from the value and the quality of this lens. I still think that this lens overall is definitely a must-have, again, especially if you're shooting event photography. But if you need one lens and you're not sure what to get and you don't have a big selection of prime lenses, this is the one that I highly recommend and I think is definitely the most bang for the buck. It's only $880. Now, I know that's not super cheap. It is still pretty expensive. But if you were to even get just two of the more inexpensive prime lenses, you'd be spending about the same amount of money. But this lens is more versatile than having only two prime lenses, again for both video and photo. The small and lightweight form factor, the detail, the quality of the lens build itself, and the image quality that you get out of this lens, I think this lens is amazing. It's definitely the Swiss Army knife of lenses for Sony full frame cameras. So if you're thinking about getting this lens, don't think, just get it, you won't regret it. If you're interested in getting this lens, I do have links in the description where you can purchase it. It doesn't change the price that you get it at, but it does help this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please drop a like and a comment if you have any questions, and please make sure to subscribe. I have a lot more videos coming soon. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate you guys. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.